Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with a news item on page number 13 of the Delhi edition of The Hindu, relevant for GS paper 2. Now, this is a sensational news. If news reports are to be believed, then Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS, in presence of US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Where? In Saudi Arabia. Now, this is a significant news. Why? Arab nations, particularly Saudi Arabia and others, they do not recognize Israel. They do not have diplomatic relations with Israel. Why? They have a single point agenda. We will recognize Israel, we will have diplomatic relations with Israel, but for that, first Israel Palestine conflict must be resolved. And this Israel Palestine conflict must be resolved based on the wishes and the aspirations of the people of Palestine. This Israel Palestine conflict we have covered at least twice in the recent past. First, on 23rd of November 2019, then again on 30th of January 2020. Please watch both these video lectures for two things. Number one, by watching these two video lectures, everything regarding Israel-Palestine conflict would become crystal clear to you. What is the origin of this conflict? What is the viewpoint of all the important players? And you will also understand, number two, what is the position of the President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump, on this Israel-Palestine conflict. So these two video lectures should be your starting point, and then you will be in a position to understand this newspaper article. We also need to understand that in all likelihood, Joe Biden is going to assume the office of the President of the United States of America. Today itself, Donald Trump has almost conceded defeat to Joe Biden because he has allowed the transition team of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to interact with the officials of the White House. So this is one step closer to Donald Trump conceding his defeat to Joe Biden. So that means Donald J. Trump is going to demit his office and Joe Biden is going to assume the presidency of the United States of America. What Donald Trump wants, he wants to leave a legacy. And if you look at the foreign policy of Donald Trump, he has few success stories as well. And that success story has got to do with Israel. How? If you look at Israel, only two Arab nations, Egypt and Jordan. Before the presidentship of Donald Trump, only two Arab nations, Egypt and Jordan, had diplomatic relations with Israel. Now, what Donald Trump did, he brokered Abraham Accords. And because of these accords, what happened? Two more Muslim nations, two more Arab nations. And which are these Arab nations? UAE and Bahrain. They have also normalized diplomatic relations with Israel. On top of that, Sudan has also agreed. There is in principle agreement by Sudan that we also want normalization of our relationship with Israel. That leaves the big player, Saudi Arabia. If Saudi Arabia also decides to have friendly, peaceful, diplomatic relations with Israel, it's going to be the long-lasting legacy of Donald Trump. But why are Saudi Arabians and Israelis coming closer to each other? The reason is Iran. How? Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States of America, they have one thing in common, and that is their combined hatred against Iran. Now you might ask, Iran is a Muslim majority nation. Saudi Arabia is also a Muslim majority nation. So why is Saudi Arabia and Iran sworn enemies? It's because Iran is Shia dominated country and Saudi Arabia is a Sunni dominated country. And Saudi Arabia for long now has been the leader of the Islamic countries, Organization of Islamic Cooperation called OIC, and Saudi Arabia has been the de facto leader of the entire Islamic world, primarily because of its petrodollars. Primarily because of the dollars it is earning by selling petroleum, oil. Now there are cracks within the Islamic world as well. And these cracks have resulted in something called a parallel body. Now, a parallel Islamic body is being developed. One by Malaysia together with Turkey and Pakistan. These three countries, they are working very closely to ensure that Saudi Arabia is displaced as the leader of the Islamic world so that these three countries can assume the leadership role of the Islamic countries. What Donald Trump has also done, he unilaterally withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. This Iran nuclear deal was signed between the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council plus Germany and Iran. And this nuclear deal or Iran nuclear deal, it put enough restrictions on Iran and almost ensured that Iran can never develop a nuclear weapon. But unilaterally, Donald Trump decided to withdraw from this Iran nuclear deal. And some also say it was because of the pressure by these two nations, Israel and Saudi Arabia. They do not want Iran to become powerful. They do not want Iran to escape from the sanctions imposed by United States of America. So tomorrow when Joe Biden will assume the presidency of the United States of America, what will happen? In all likelihood, he is going to bring Iran back on the negotiating table. That means Joe Biden may withstand the pressures and tactics of these two countries and may try to resolve the problems with Iran. That is why Donald Trump and Israel and Saudi Arabia, they do not want to waste time and they want to normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And that is going to alter the politics of the Middle East. Although Saudi Arabia has denied such a meeting, but one important minister of Israel, he has recognized and praised this meeting between Netanyahu and Mohammed bin Salman. There are few more things that we need to understand. This is what in UPSC we call backward linkages. What are these backward linkages? Mossad has played a very important role in this meeting. And what is Mossad? Mossad is the intelligence agency of Israel. And in match the following types of questions, you may be asked about the intelligence agencies of different countries. For example, Central Intelligence Agency is the intelligence agency of the United States of America. ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence, is an intelligence agency of Pakistan. Similarly, MI5 and MI6. MI stands for military intelligence. MI5 is basically a security service and MI6 is the Foreign Intelligence Service of Britain. We have R&AW, Research and Analysis Wing, which is the External Intelligence Agency of India. China has MSS, which is Ministry of State Security. And the intelligence agency of France is DGSE, which is Director General for External Security. We also need to understand something else. When did India recognize Israel? India recognized Israel in the year 1950, but India and Israel did not have full diplomatic relations with each other. There was only a small office of Israel in Bombay. It was only in the year 1992 when P.V. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister that full diplomatic relations between India and Israel were established. V.D. Savarkar was a great proponent of Israel, but the government of India in initial days, for two reasons, decided not to have full diplomatic relations with Israel. Reason number one was Israel was created in the name of religion. Israel for Jews, for Judaism. That means a state being created in the name of religion. So Pandit Nehru and the policy makers in the initial years of our republic, they were against the idea of states being created in the name of religion. And reason number two, why India did not have full diplomatic relations with Israel in the initial years, it was because we wanted to have good relationship with the Islamic nations in the Gulf. Since they did not recognize Israel, if we would have established full diplomatic relations with Israel, then our relationship would have been affected vis-a-vis these Gulf Islamic nations. And we also need to understand, according to various reports, Israel is the second largest defense supplier to India after Russia. Can be important statement for your prelims examination. That is all that you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another newspaper article on the same page 13 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu. Joe Biden has picked Mr. Blinken as the Secretary of State. Mr. Blinken, he was the Deputy Secretary of State when Barack Obama was the President of the United States of America. Now he has been chosen to become the Secretary of State, which basically means the External Affairs Minister of the United States. When we look at Mr. Blinken's statements in the last few months, it gives us a sense of his approach towards India. Mr. Blinken was speaking at Hudson Institute, which is in Washington, D.C. And at this institute, Mr. Antony Blinken, what he said that we want to strengthen and deepen our relationship with India. And that is going to be our very high priority. And it is very important for Indo-Pacific. It is very important that India also plays a very important role in the neighborhood. So his statement reflects the kind of importance that Mr. Blinken will attach to India and good relations with India. And Mr. Blinken has also referred to the bipartisan support in United States towards India. Bipartisan support, whether it is a Republican president or a Democratic president, doesn't matter. Good relations with India are going to be the priority of both the political parties in United States. That is why Mr. Blinken once said that if we look at the years of Bill Clinton and then Bush years and then Obama years, significantly we have seen that India is becoming increasingly closer to United States of America. So in US, there is a bipartisan support to India. So for those with political science and IR as their optional subject, this newspaper article is very, very important. Because Mr. Blinken also talked about the contribution of Joe Biden. Joe Biden, he was a senator when George Bush was the president of the United States. And it was during the presidentship of George Bush when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of India that 123 agreement was signed between India and United States. And it was this 123 agreement, or what we call Indo-US nuclear deal, which ended India's nuclear apartheid. And in this 123 agreement, Joe Biden played a very important role, despite the fact that he was from the opposition Democratic Party. This reflects the bipartisan support towards India. Mr. Blinken also talked about something very important. When Barack Obama was the president of United States, India was categorized as major defense partner. And this is something very, very significant. Initially, this tag, major defense partner, United States would give this tag to its allies. But India was a friend. It was not an ally. Despite the fact that India was not an ally, it was only a friend. Even then, this tag, major defense partner, was given to India by the Obama administration. This was the first time a US administration gave anyone outside its traditional partners this tag of MDP. So by choosing Mr. Antony Blinken as the next Secretary of State, who has made favorable statements towards India in the recent past, so we can expect that India will be a priority for the new dispensation in United States of America. And Mr. Biden has also appointed former Secretary of State John Kerry as the special presidential envoy for climate. Because let's not forget, Donald J. Trump withdrew unilaterally from the Paris climate deal. So in all likelihood, if John Kerry, who was very instrumental in getting India also to sign this Paris climate deal, if Mr. John Kerry is now the special envoy for climate, which means United States will consider rejoining the Paris climate deal, which also takes us to another topic, World War Zero. So you might be asked in your prelims examination, what is World War Zero? It's basically an American coalition launched by John Kerry in the year 2019 to do what? to fight climate crisis. The objective of this coalition is that let's hold 10 million climate conversations in 2020 with citizens across the political spectrum. Can be relevant for your prelims examination. Now let's look at some of the editorials and columns from today's newspaper. First up, Overboard, Overboard. This editorial is in response to the ordinance promulgated by the Kerala governor, which many people criticized violates freedom of speech and expression enshrined under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. Now the Kerala government has decided not to enforce this ordinance, but this editorial talks about few things that we need to discuss very briefly, because we have discussed this topic yesterday as well. Yesterday I told you that this ordinance is basically in violation of the Shreya Singhal judgment of 2015. But we also need to understand two things. Number one, there is distribution of powers between the center and the states. There is something called union list, state list, concurrent list. On this concurrent list, we have something called civil procedure. We have something called criminal procedure. That means on civil procedure, criminal procedure, both the state legislative assembly as well as the parliament will have the power to make laws. But in case there is a clash between the law passed by the state legislature and the law passed by the parliament, it is the parliamentary law which will prevail. What has happened in this case is there is a difference between what is a cognizable offense and what is a non-cognizable offense. If an offense is cognizable, that means the police can register an FIR against you even without the permission, without the order of a magistrate. That's what a cognizable offense is. If X is a cognizable offense, and if A has committed this offense, then the police can file an FIR against A even without the permission of the magistrate. Permission of magistrate is not important, not required. But if this is a non-cognizable offense, then police cannot register FIR against A without the permission of the magistrate. This ordinance, which was promulgated by Kerala governor, what it did, it treated criminal defamation as a cognizable offense. Whereas in IPC, criminal defamation is a non-cognizable offense. Not just that, under IPC, the punishment for criminal defamation is 2 years. But this ordinance promulgated by the governor, it has increased the jail term to 3 years. That means the Kerala government, through this ordinance, has increased the quantum of punishment from 2 years to 3 years, has made criminal defamation a cognizable offense. This editorial says this could not have been possible without the permission of the President of India, which means whenever a state legislative law tries to violate a parliamentary law, permission or assent of the President is necessary. Since this was not done in this case, this ordinance was unconstitutional. That means this ordinance was unconstitutional not only because it violated the Shreya Singhal judgment, but also because it violated a very important requirement, the assent of President, before introducing such an ordinance. In today's newspaper on page number 1, there is a very important article wherein Dr. Raghuram Rajan and former Deputy Governor of RBI, Mr. Viral Acharya, they have criticized the proposed plan of the Reserve Bank of India in allowing corporates in the banking sector. This is a very important topic, and on this important topic, our faculty Shyam sir is coming out with a detailed video lecture. Please wait for that video lecture. Now let's look at another column, a conspiracy against interfaith love. This is where we need to understand what is this love jihad. Now when we look at love jihad, there is a right-wing definition of love jihad. There is a left-wing definition of love jihad as well. What is this right-wing definition of love jihad? Here is a Muslim man. What this Muslim man does, he hides his identity, conceals his identity, and he comes across in contact with a Hindu girl and then seduce this Hindu girl into marriage and ultimately force this Hindu girl to convert to Islam. So love jihad is basically a well thought of conspiracy by the Muslim men, because they hide their identity, they trap the gullible Hindu girls, seduce them into marriage, force them to convert, and then produce Muslim children. And through this conspiracy, what you're trying to do, you're trying to convert the Hindu majority India into Muslim majority India. According to left wing, there is no jihad in love. Love is pure. According to left wing, love jihad is imaginary. But what is the origin of this term, love jihad? Basically, in mid 2000s, there was a campaign which started in coastal Karnataka and also in some parts of northern Kerala, where many people accused that there is this controversy, this conspiracy of love jihad. Ultimately, in the year 2009, an investigation was carried out in Karnataka by the Karnataka CID, Criminal Investigation Department. All these complaints of love jihad, they were investigated by CID, and ultimately Karnataka CID said there is no such thing as love jihad. All these allegations are false. Then came this case in 2018. This girl Hadia, her previous name was Akila. She was a Hindu and then she converted to Islam. After that, she married this boy, Shafin Jahan, and ultimately the father of this girl filed a case in saying there should be investigation because this is a case of love jihad. Basically, my daughter has been trapped by a Muslim man and they want to take my daughter to Syria. They want to force her to join Islamic State. Ultimately, Kerala High Court entered into picture and annulled the marriage. Kerala High Court said this marriage is not legal. And this matter reached the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court once again reiterated and expanded the scope of Article 21. Supreme Court said if Article 21 talks about right to life and personal liberty, it also talks about and gives you another fundamental right, right to marry. If a girl and the boy, they are adults, the state has no power to control them, to impose their own views on this adult couple. It is their life, their responsibility, no matter how they want to live their lives. Even their parents cannot force them to marry the person of their choice. But now this concept of love jihad is again gaining currency. Why? Uttar Pradesh and 4 other states in India, they are trying to bring in law to curb love jihad, and one reason for that was the Allahabad High Court order. Allahabad High Court gave an order recently wherein it said that if you are converting just because of marriage, then this is unacceptable. But the same Allahabad High Court has now modified its earlier order. The Allahabad High Court has said that right to live with a person of his or her choice, irrespective of religion professed by them, is intrinsic to the right to life and personal liberty. The right of 2 adults to stay together cannot be encroached upon by the state. That's what Allahabad High Court has said. If we look at in India, a vast majority of Indians, between 95 to 99%, and it varies from state to state. Majority of Indians, they marry intra-caste, they marry intra-religion. That means majority of the marriages are not inter-caste or inter-religious. On top of that, 70 to 80% of Indians, regardless of their age, regardless of their religion, they disapprove of inter-caste and inter-religious marriages. So less than 5% of marriages are inter-caste, less than 2% of the marriages are inter-religious marriages. Just for this minuscule proportion, if you're trying to bring in a law, you're basically part of a communal agenda, according to Anjali Modi. One section of the society says if a Hindu woman marries a Muslim boy, what is the need for this Hindu woman to convert to Islam? Why can't she practice her own religion? If you are really in love with each other, why don't you allow this girl to practice her own religion? If you are allowing her to practice her own religion, there won't be any concept such as love jihad. But there is another section of the society which says this is some sort of patriarchy. It demeans women. Who one marries and whether or not one practices a religion, it's an individual choice. But when we are talking about inter-caste marriages, inter-religious marriages, there is a law which allows for inter-caste and inter-religious marriages without any need for conversion as well. And that law is Special Marriages Act of 1954. This Special Marriages Act, it was meant to facilitate inter-religious and inter-caste marriages. But it is this law ultimately which creates huge hurdles. That means if there is a couple belonging to two different religions, they would prefer that let's convert rather than get married under Special Marriages Act. Why? Because it is this act which creates hurdles. How? If a couple AB wants to get married under Muslim personal law or under Christian personal law or under Parsi personal law, there is no notice period. You go to a mosque or a church and get married to each other, problem solved. But if you want to marry under Special Marriages Act, then you have to provide 1 month notice, which means the couple A and B, they approach the officer at the registrar of marriages and you want to register your marriage. 1 month notice will be provided by this officer. What will happen in this 1 month? The parents of A and B, they will force the couple to drop the idea of marriage. Force them, coerce them, threaten them, sometimes kill them as well. That's problem number one. There is another problem. Let's say, for example, the boy is from Karnataka and the girl is from Maharashtra. Special Marriages Act stipulates that this marriage can be registered either at Karnataka or Maharashtra. But boy's family are against this marriage, so you cannot apply for marriage in Karnataka. Girl's family is also against this marriage, so you cannot apply for this marriage in Maharashtra. Then what is the only option for you? You elope, you run away. Even if you run away, and let's say, for example, you reach Delhi and you apply for marriage in Delhi, then what the Delhi court will do? It will send notice to Karnataka, it will send notice to Maharashtra that one of your permanent resident is going to get married in Delhi. This basically means you are telling the family of the boy and the girl, please book your tickets, railway tickets, air tickets, come to Delhi, use force and stop the marriage. So it's like an open invitation to the family of the boy and the girl, please come and stop this marriage. Let's look at this paragraph. In effect, what this means is that the marriage officers must send a letter to the permanent addresses of the parties, informing them that their son or daughter is about to do the unthinkable, exercise his or her fundamental right to marry someone of his or her choosing. That's the flaw with Special Marriages Act. And in all of this, basically, you are ensuring that parents as well as caste leaders as well as religious leaders, they are very much aware of the time, of the location of this marriage, so that all of them can come at this time and location and stop this marriage. So basically, Special Marriages Act, what it does, it creates the nation India and converts it into a super khap panchayat. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper column. Now let's look at the practice questions, first for prelims and then for mains. School of Philosophy and the founder. Which of the following pairs are correctly matched? Nyaya, the founder is Gautam Muni, correct. Veshika, the founder is Kannada, correct. Yoga, the founder is Hiranyagarbha. And Sankhya Philosophy, the founder is Kapil Muni. So only 1 and 2 are correctly matched. So A is the right answer. Question number 2. Which of the following was conceived as the first Indian mission to study the sun? And the answer is Aditya L1C. Question number 3. Consider the following events in the history of space research in India. What is the correct chronology of the events, starting from the earliest time? So if you look at the earliest time, the year was 1962 when this Indian National Committee for Space Research was established. Then in the year 1967, ISRO was established. Then in the year 1971, Satish Dhawan Center in Sriharikota was established. And it was in 1979 that Bhaskara 1 was launched, which means D, 2143 is the correct answer. Question number 4. This Mughal translated into Persian what? The Bhagavad Gita as well as 52 Upanishads. He was the eldest son of Shah Jahan, who was killed after losing the war of succession against his brother. Who among the following Mughal is referred to in the above passage? The name is D. Dara Shikoh. Question number 5, Prelims 2020. If a particular plant species is placed under Schedule 6 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, what is the implication? The implication is that a license is required to cultivate that plant. Now let's look at the mains based questions. Two essay topics for you. This is in relation to the ordinance promulgated by the Kerala governor, and this is in relation to United States of America and the controversy surrounding Joe Biden and Donald J. Trump. Historically, one of the main defects of constitutional government has been the failure to ensure the fair value of political liberty. Question number 2, India's shift from non-alignment to multi-alignments. And this is also in response to RCEP debate going on. So write your essays in 1000 to 1200 words and send them across. That is it from our newspaper analysis for today. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day.